coronavirus has changed all of our lives, but how will it impact our future? Does this change everything? I am Allar Tankler. On this episode of Does This Change Everything? What has changed for small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs as they're typically referred to? Why are politicians and policymakers speaking about the impact of the coronavirus on small businesses so much? What has changed for them, and why have they specifically suffered particularly badly? And what can we do to help them now? So today I'm speaking with Anna Fusari, who is the European Investment Bank's head of division for banks and corporates in the Adriatic Sea region. The reason why we're speaking about small businesses with the head of division for lending to banks is that the European Investment Bank finances small businesses through local banks. Additionally, Anna has been working hard on the EIB's response to help SMEs affected by the coronavirus. So, hi Anna. Has the coronavirus changed everything for small businesses?
Well, the answer is quite simple, and indeed, it's a great change it's a big change for SMEs. They are greatly exposed to the negative impact of the ongoing epidemic breakout because, first of all, they are more labor intensive than other companies. They are more exposed to disruption, especially when workforces are in quarantine, as is happening in several countries. In addition, they also have thinner liquidity reserves, so they have limited financial alternatives because they mostly rely on support from local banks. And in the majority of the cases, they lack assets that can be disposed or they can use as a collateral for new credit line. So clearly all those factors make for them quite difficult to cope with what is called the liquidity squeeze. I would say that indeed all the politicians are really keen on SMEs per se because at the end they are the backbone of the European real economy. They account, just to make few numbers, for roughly 2/3 of the overall employment, and they contribute for more than 55% of the overall value added in the non-financial business economy. So clearly, in this situation, supporting the survival of the SMEs, because indeed we are talking about making them survive during this crisis, is crucial for mitigating the systemic impact, but also to sustain employment and to create the conditions which are needed for the future growth once the pandemic is over.
Now, you mentioned liquidity squeeze. How does that work exactly?
On one hand, they cannot produce, so they cannot sell their own goods to the market, but still they have to pay their own fixed costs, meaning they have to pay the rents, which cannot be put on hold. They have to pay taxes, and they have to pay their own supplier as well, because indeed this is a very specific crisis, and this outbreak is a combined demand and supply shock for the economy, which indeed make it even harder to cope with it.
So the problem is not only that the employees of these businesses, they cannot come to work and they cannot produce and provide the services. There's also other things affecting their business. There's the demand side as well.
Yeah, Indeed, because at the end, all the containment measure that has been put in place to limit the spread out of the virus are affecting the demand. And indeed, when we look at the sector, the most affected one are precisely the one where demand is slowed down significantly.
Okay, and so in this situation, which, as you mentioned, it's highly unusual. What kind of help do these small businesses need? What kind of what can be done to help them?
Well, I guess that the first answer is that SMEs need support now, immediately, and clearly the most easy way to provide an answer is provide some brief in terms of liquidity need, meaning in a pragmatic way, by extending credit holidays and grace periods for capital and interest payments, so de facto extending the duration of their own lending, but also on the other hand, improving access to new financial support by providing additional working capital facilities, including factoring, which is great because at the end we are talking to a financial transaction in which company can sell its own receivable to a third party, an overdraft and credit line.
Essentially, these small businesses now, they need access to bank loans in a situation where actually if a bank was to look at their business, they might not look so healthy to the bank. Is that right? I mean, because, if a bank looks at a business and they see that this business might not be, producing at the top of their ability, the demand for their products or services might not be very high right now, they might not qualify for a typical business loan right now.
Well, indeed, in terms of credit quality, SMEs will face a deterioration on their own credit metrics. That is for sure, because indeed they will be impacted in terms of profitability, in terms of revenue generation, in terms of reduction of the liquidity buffer, which are all metrics that indeed all the banks are keen to see, possibly as most as sound as possible. Now, it's true that this is expected to be hopefully a temporary shock of the economy, meaning that indeed what would be the standard response from the bank, meaning reducing the financing support, has not to be put in place, because otherwise we are setting up a sort of a spiral effect where we are accelerating the bankruptcies instead of making a larger number of SMEs surviving to the crisis. And precisely this is why, several member states has put in place a measure by which there are some by law holiday period for payment of installment and interest under existing lending, and banks are somehow recommended and invited to keep up the support with liquidity measure to those SMEs.
Okay, and in addition to these measures that the member states have taken on a national basis, how can the European Investment Bank help these businesses?
We need to focus on measures that can be undertaken using existing instruments, because we need to provide a response immediately, and we cannot really wait months because it might be really too late. And this is why we are already working on initiatives under, existing instruments, while in parallel we are developing other initiatives that can provide some sort of a counter guarantee or capital relief to banks which are close to the market and are the best suited to provide additional liquidity to the SMEs. So on one hand, we are developing liquidity measures, so additional funding to our financial intermediary in order to contribute to pump liquidity into the system. But on the other hand as well, we are trying to provide support to the banks as well, which later on will be hit by the outbreaks, because the quality of the loan book will be definitely affected with capital relief instruments.
Thank you very much. This was Anna Fusari, Head of Division for Financing Banks and Corporates in the Adriatic Sea region at the European Investment Bank. This was Does This Change Everything? From the European Investment Bank, the EU Bank.